Welcome to the Go Big with Gib podcast, a place for professionals, business owners, and entrepreneurs to talk about their big wins. All right. Hey, Shawn, how are you today?
Awesome, Gib. I'm excited to have a conversation with you about real estate, my friend.
Absolutely. Look, it's a pleasure to have you on today. And, let's start out. Let's jump right into the meat and potatoes. Let's talk about Vodyssey. What is Vodyssey and when was it created?
Yeah, awesome. I started Vodyssey, back in 2017 is really when I started putting everything together. And I wrote a book called What the Hell is a Lifestyle Asset, where we help investors, individual investors, build a portfolio and try to build lifestyle financial freedom of buying vacation homes and short-term rentals. And so back in 2017, before it was, short-term rentals were becoming kind of a lot more popular. And then obviously then COVID hit and it just exploded. But we launched Vodyssey as it is today in 2019 after I wrote the book and put it all together. It's interesting, and now we're the largest coaching program working with investors across the country. We've got almost 3,000 active investors across the country buying vacation rentals, a collective portfolio of almost 2,000 properties. And so it's been a lot of fun. It's been a wild ride as short-term rentals have become really a mainstream asset class at this stage, which is really fun to watch the maturity and the growth of this asset class.
So you started, so just to go back a little bit, you started, the program back in 2017, I think you said, and then you rebranded your program and began calling it Vodyssey in 2019. Is that correct?
Yeah. We started as Lifestyle Asset University, and I got in trouble with the state of Utah because you can't use the word university in a business name. And there's 5 states out there that I didn't realize that was the case. And so Utah was one of them, and that's where we're located. And so we ended up having to rebrand, and I chose Vodyssey because I wanted to never have to deal with a rebrand again. I didn't want to have anybody saying, that was generic or was copied. And so we just made up this word. And I love the word Odyssey because any investment journey is just that. It's this epic journey. There's bumps in the road, there's ups, downs, and it's this long-term journey of investing. And we threw the V in front of it for vacation how Vodyssey came about.
I love that. What a great name for the program. Talk to me a little bit about, obviously I'm a Vodyssey member. I've really enjoyed my membership in Vodyssey. I've learned a ton. I've made a lot of connections. Gosh, it's such a great network, and there's such a great group of support people, within the Vodyssey community. For example, you introduced me to Mike Pine and Kevin Snyder. And Mike and Kevin, have been doing my taxes ever since. You introduced me to Mike Whitfield on the design front, and Mike has helped me with my own short-term rental property, which is in the Great Smoky Mountains. And Mike really did a beautiful job. He went in there and put in there all sorts of artwork and furnishings that really made the property, a top performer in that area. And he basically took what I would say, a house, and he made it into a home. He made it into a place where when people come there, they feel comfortable and welcomed. And it's just every little detail of the property is so meticulously picked out. And I know that's what Vodyssey's all about, is having those vacation rentals that perform at the top of the market. So you're not just coaching people on how to acquire a vacation rental property, but you're teaching them how to perform at the very top of the market. Tell me a little bit about what the program entails. Of course, I know from having gone through the training modules and all the tutorials and having attended a lot of your live events, but tell our audience a little bit about what the program looks like in general terms.
Yeah, and I think that you hit on it is it's not just about buying the right property in the right area, right? And so when I started investing in vacation rentals I bought my first one in 2006. So way before they were popular, before Airbnb, before Vrbo. I was using local classifieds and Craigslist to rent our lake cabin in the, outside of Salt Lake. It was called Bear Lake, Utah, and it's about 2 hours outside of Salt Lake. And so we would just use local classifieds to do this. Well, as we've kind of progressed, we realized that there's three major phases to success in any sort of an asset class. I've been investing in real estate for 23 years. And so it's, that's all I've ever done full time. And any mature asset, any mature market, it doesn't even have to be in real estate. The top 20% of the market makes 80% of the money. And you have to typically do certain things to operate in the top 20% of a market. Most people were introduced and have become, kind of familiar with short-term rentals post-COVID, right? And they became really, really popular. And post-COVID was this era where it was kind of this blip in time where just having a property, you made money. So you just had to have a good property in a good area because there was so much demand for the amount of supply that was out there that I tell people, if we're all honest and we look in the mirror, having a short-term rental during that time was like having toilet paper during COVID. Everybody was making money. Well, that's not the game that we play anymore. And when I put all this together, that wasn't the game we played. You had to have a really investable market. You had to have a good property in a good area. And you had to have two other things on the backside of that now we're getting reminded of is you had to set up this unique experience for a specific target audience, and then you had to have management in place to deliver that experience. And that's a piece that a lot of people forgot about because most people think because we're in real estate, we're selling properties. We don't sell properties. We sell experiences. People don't travel to buy a property. They travel to have an experience. And so we had to be really, really good and understand that that's a major phase. We got a really great property. People assume that buying the right property in the right area, that's easy for a lot of people to buy into. Those other two phases are really, really important. And when we put the Vodyssey together, that third phase is marketing, right? Now I've got a really good property. I've put together a great experience for a target audience. I've got the management in place to deliver that, but nobody knows about me, right? These markets are really, really crowded now. It's hard to stand out. And so you have to be able to market effectively so that you can operate and get somebody to book your property above and beyond everybody else's. And so tying all three of those pieces together, the acquisition side, the setup and management side, and ultimately the marketing side, and being able to do it all together congruently allows you to operate in the top 20% of the market. That was my goal with Vodyssey, is to say, I want to help investors get into this game and understand the whole picture. We call them short-term rentals, but they're long-term investments. These are not short-term investments. This is a long-term asset class, and now it's a very mainstream asset class. And so we also put this together and said, okay, people need a roadmap. They need somewhere to, step one, we have a 9-step process that takes you through those three major phases. They needed a blueprint and a roadmap to follow that was proven, right? We've got, like I said before, we've got thousands of members now. We've got 1,000, collective portfolio that's very, very large. So the roadmap is very, very well traveled. But when you have just the plan of attack, the plan to move forward, we also realize that implementation, knowledge is one thing, implementation is another, right? And so we wanted to make sure that there was coaching on the side that said, okay, you're going to have sticking points. You're going to have problems. You're going to have times where even the best laid out plan, the most thought out plan is going to have challenges. And so we've lined up some of the best coaches in the industry to be able to say, hey, listen, we know how to get past that. And then to your point too, we've got a community on the backside of that. And I'm a huge fan of coaching, and I'm a huge fan of masterminds. I spend, well over 6 figures a year for that myself. I know you do invest in yourself in masterminds. I mean, obviously you're part of ours, but we're both huge fans of training and masterminds and community. And we've got this amazing community. Well, the byproduct of all that is we've got a very large collective footprint of very high-end operators across the country. And so we get the best in the business to reach out to us. And this is something that I didn't intend on when I put all this together, but we found that you mentioned Mike and Kevin at Pine Coast CPAs. You mentioned Whitfield at Wind Development. We get the best advisors, the best team members. Though my team is some of the top in the industry, and we can tap into the best CPAs, the best designers, the best photographers, the best marketing experts. Just with what we do at Vodyssey, we spend almost $4 million a year on paid ads. And so we understand paid ads really, really well. We've got one of the best teams in the business and running that where we can tap into. And so it's been really, really fun watching this grow, but also because of our collective footprint, we get the best in the business that want to do business with us. And it makes it that much easier to operate toward the top of the market, right? And so there's all these things that stack on top of each other because people look at us and say, well, what is it exactly that you do to have the top property in a market? And I say, it's not one thing. It's having the right team members, right? Being able to be very intentional about those three major phases. It's having the right community around us, being able to tap into the best resources. All these different things stack on top of each other to allow us to operate at the very top of markets when a lot of people are saying, man, it seems like these are really saturated markets. Is that a problem, or can I do this anymore? And we're having a lot of fun doing it because there's all these different things that stack on top to help you have that success.
Sure. No, I remember my process when I was looking for my first vacation property. I looked in the group chat and I connected with other group members and said, look, I'm looking to buy in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park or right on the outskirts of the park. Who knows a realtor? And so I was referred to a realtor through the Vodyssey group. And then I was referred to several different lenders. And so at every step of the process, I was able to get a referral. And having that referral gave me so much more confidence going into things. Like, I already know that this real estate agent has worked with one of our other group members. They had a very good experience with this person, and so I feel safe working with them. When I didn't know about masterminds, my thought process was that you would get all your information from the coaching and from the leader of the group, and of course, people that have been doing masterminds for a long time know better than that a lot of the learning comes from other group members, and that is the definition of a true mastermind, is that you're helping each other.
Absolutely. 100% agree. In fact, when we're talking to people and we're inviting them into our coaching program and our mastermind, we call it the Empire Club. I always tell them, hey, as proud as I am of the course itself on the masterclass, as proud as I am of the coaching that we provide, the most valuable aspect of what we have is this community, the Empire Club Mastermind community, because and I tell people all the time, I mean, you've got a collective group of people operating at a very, very high level and that you can tap into that probably have, way more experience than a lot of the coaches out there teaching this stuff. And so it's a very intentional, very high operating, like very high performance community. And when you can tap into that, talk about accelerating your progress and accelerating your learning by being able to surround yourself with other people that are doing the same things. Look what you and Kate have done, Gib. It's amazing what you guys branch off into do. And we have hundreds and hundreds of stories like that of just members that are coming in. We've got over 1,000 members almost now making over 6 figures a year from their portfolio. We've got a handful making 7 figures a year. That's crazy. And so you can tap into that as part of a mastermind that is very, like I said, very high performance. And I do the same thing with business masterminds, with different personal development masterminds, and it's always the same thing. A good mastermind and a good community is invaluable if you get involved and you have to put yourself out there, you have to talk to people, but it's everybody. When you're in a good mastermind, you share the good, the bad, the ugly. It's like this abundance mindset when you're in a good mastermind where nobody's worried about competing and, taking business from each other. It's like, hey, we're all going to raise the bar. We're all going to get better together. And sure enough, the bar just continues to raise year over year. And it's just really fun to watch.
One observation that I've had about Vodyssey is, you seem to attract people that are like yourself. And I think that's just a general principle of life. But for you in particular, you have attracted a community of people that are very honest. They have a lot of integrity. They want to have that abundance mindset and do well. And they've got a lot of goals and a lot of intentionality, but you don't have a lot of people bragging about how great they are, or how, a lot of people are very understated. And I think that's kind of your position too, Shawn. Like, I've always seen you as kind of a, you're not necessarily going to brag about all of your big wins. You're just a very humble guy, very approachable, but you've done a lot of really great things. And, I think that the Vodyssey group in and of itself, you don't have that off-putting, sentiment that you get with some of the other groups that I've been involved in, where it's, let me brag about how rich I am. I love masterminds, but there are some masterminds out there that are kind of, what have you done for me today type of a place to go. And it's just, Vodyssey's the complete opposite of that. I found that there's a ton of really genuine people in your group. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I feel so lucky every single day because of the people that we've attracted. And, if I have a small piece of that and a part of that, I'm happy to, to be a part of it. Like, I learned so much from them. And to your point, there's a lot of success that is very understated in our group, and which I like, right? I've gone through stages in life where I was, the guy early on in my career that was like, hey, I have to show all the cool stuff I have, my cars and my houses and my gold chains and everything else, which is funny to me now. I bought the coolest shoes and the watches, and there's nothing wrong with, I'm not trying to downplay any of that, but now, you're going to find me in a cowboy hat, Wranglers, and boots every day. And it's just kind of who we are. But what I really, really like is, and what, you've got that understated nature, but also you've got this group of people that we know nobody's coming to save us. We're saying, hey, we want to be self-reliant. We want to have that grit and determination to roll up our sleeves and get things done, and not look for somebody else to blame or play the victim role. And so I'm really grateful that we've attracted that kind of mentality as well. And I always, we kind of call it the cowboy way, right? And that's just because my personal, way of doing things. But it's this understated way of going about things, but we're here to win too. We're very, very competitive. We want to raise the bar every single year, every single day. And, I always tell people, go pick one thing you can do today to build that life you don't want a vacation from. So we're wanting to roll up our sleeves and get after it. And I feel so lucky every single day that I get to go to work. I don't even know how to call this stuff work anymore. But we do work hard. I'm in the office, 10, 12-hour days, but it feels so fun because, to your point, the people that we're around are really, really fun to be a part of. And it's not always, we assume that like I put this together, Gib. I didn't come from a lot of money. I didn't grow up with a lot of money. I've been very, very fortunate to have some success that we've had now, but I still feel like that kind of the blue collar guy that really rolled up my sleeves and got to work every single day. And we attract people who are very understated, business owners, high income earners. They make a lot of money, but they also come from this kind of a background story that they still identify with that person that is, we don't identify with saying we're any better than anybody else. And we also attract some of my funnest success stories and people we work with are, school teachers, stay-at-home moms, people that are like, hey, listen, I want to change the trajectory of what I'm doing in my life, and I'm willing to put in the work. And I love working with those people as much as I love working with the business owners that have a lot more money and are a little bit more fortunate and a few steps ahead of the game. But it's really, really fun to see somebody take those first steps as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So while we're talking about some of the students and some of the success stories that you've witnessed, tell us a little bit about that. Like, you've had so many people that have come into your program and been able to generate a bunch of cash flow, and they've just experienced the benefit of having that lifestyle asset in a place that they love, in a place that they want to vacation themselves. And now they own a property there. And instead of going and renting an Airbnb or renting, a vacation property on Vrbo, they own their own property. Tell us about some of the success stories that you've
Yeah.
experienced?
And we've got so many, and I'll just kind of roll to the ended and said one of those favorite ones. I was thinking about Brian and Julie, and they bought a property in Pennsylvania. Brian's a school teacher. His wife's a stay-at-home mom and homeschools their two daughters. And they weren't sitting on piles of cash. They weren't sitting on a ton of money, but they had enough equity in their primary residence and a dream, right? And they found us online. They reached out to us, and they decided to join the Empire Club. And that was a big move, right? Our mentorship and coaching program's not that cheap, right? And it's one of the more expensive ones when it comes to real estate coaching. And it was a big commitment for them to even just join and say, hey, and their whole goal was to say, we want to surround ourselves with people that are a few steps ahead of us, right? We want to say, hey, listen, we're very conservative. We don't make a ton of money. We don't come from a ton of money, but we have this dream and this goal to change what's going on. And we want to teach our kids that that you can go make things happen. And that story I love. They fast forward, they saved up enough money and combined some of the money that they had in a HELOC in a property that they had, their primary residence that they owned, and they went and bought their dream cabin, and it was in the Poconos. And they went, and it was all they could afford to do, but it was a fixer-upper. And so they spent 6 months, and they got her family involved, his family involved, and they spent 6 months and rehabbed it together, did a lot of the work themselves, launched it, and became one of the top properties in that market after a year, and just changed, their mindset of what is possible, which is huge, right? And now they're working on property number 2, but they've got this asset now that's producing every single year for them. They're not retiring on that one property, but they had this mindset shift, and when I hear them talk about it, and they hear them talk about also the grit and determination it took to get from A to B, right? And say, okay, to buy this property and then actually launch it. There's a lot that goes into that, especially when you do it yourself. But they had their daughters involved, and they said now their daughters are talking about property number 2, and they said just the mindset that we're showing our kids that this is possible is huge for them, right? And I love those stories. Like that's one of my favorite stories. We got James and Emily. He was a realtor. He was a minister and had a real estate license. His full-time job was a minister, and they bought a $120,000 property, and they didn't have a lot of money to dive into the game. Bought this property up in Wintergreen Resort, and ultimately it produced awesome, and it was a cash cow for them for what they have. Their return on investment, annual return on investment, was over 100,000 or 100%, and so it was a crazy cash on cash return. But it was a smaller property, and then they ended up they're on property number 4. He's the top agent in that market because he was a minister, still a minister, but he became more of a full-time agent, and really is the go-to agent for this resort community, and they're just having a ball with it. And then you've got on the other side of the coin, where you've got Jeff and Jamie, who sold an RV business. They had as much money as you really want to spend. In fact, Jeff came to me when they joined and said, hey, Shawn, I want to buy 20 properties a year for the next 3 years. I want to have a portfolio of 60 properties. And I kind of laughed, because in a lot of real estate, you would think that 60 properties is not that huge of a portfolio, right? Obviously in multifamily, you have thousands of doors as a big portfolio. You get 100 doors of something, it's a bigger portfolio. In the short-term rental space, smaller portfolios are more common. You'll find portfolios of 6, 10, 12 properties, and they are very high producing portfolios. And so, but just the sheer being able to set up that many properties in a year would be very, very difficult. So I said, Jeff, you're not going to do that. He said, well, watch me. And first year, he went out and bought 7 properties, and by the end of the year, he said, "Man, I was exhausted. I was really moving. We were working with him like crazy. Went and bought 7 properties, but long story short, that property portfolio, they've got 8 properties now. They bought 1 property the next year, so they added 1 property the next year. They have 8 properties, and they net over $1 million a year in their pocket from a portfolio of 8 properties. And so, it's really fun to see the wide range of different, people who are able to apply and take advantage of this asset class, depending on their property goals, depending on what they're able to do individually. And all of them, though, are life-changing. And it's really a blessing for me to be a part of that. It's really fun to just be a small part of that journey and helping people just, and like Brian and Julie just saying, the fact that our kids are talking about this is what the byproduct of really chasing your dreams is. And that's what we want our kids to do. We want them to continue chasing their dreams. And that's really fun to be a part of.
gosh, it just astonishes me to think about the mindset of Brian and Julie. I think they were the first example that you talked about, and they were the ones that one of them was a school teacher and the other one was a stay-at-home mom, I believe.
Yeah.
You know, for them to take that risk, I'm sure they thought it was a massive amount of risk. You know, I mean, everybody has a different risk tolerance, right? You know, I've found over the years that my risk tolerance is much, much higher than normal, you know, people. But to me, the most risky thing, the most risky thing is to do nothing. If you do nothing and you take no risk, to me, that is, you're destined for failure. You know, you cannot grow, and you cannot have an abundance mindset, and you cannot succeed unless you take risk. So to me, I'm very pro, you know, taking a risk. I will take an educated risk, especially when I'm betting on myself. But if you think about it for Brian and Julie, you know, what an awesome thing for them to overcome that fear, because you see a lot of people making decisions based on fear. And, you know, my experience has been that that's never a good thing when you're making a decision based on an emotion, and particularly being afraid. And for them to take I guess, you know, they probably borrowed against their primary residence. You said they had some equity in their primary residence and they borrowed against it to buy this other property. That is a big risk for them probably, but for it to work out the way that it did, now they're gearing up. You know, they've just continued to build on that, it's a life altering change in mindset, which I think is super cool.
And it's the number one thing, right, is the mindset. We overlook the fact that our mindset is what gets in the way of really our success almost always, right? It's not, and there is a level of risk in anything you decide to do. I mean, you walk out the door, you're taking a risk. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a level of risk. You have to take calculated risks. We're not saying, and I know that you're not saying this, that we're not taking our life savings and putting it on red or black. We're also not gamblers. I'm very, very conservative. The older I get, the more conservative I get. But I'm willing to bet on myself. I'm willing to take those actions. But consider how most of us grew up. Most of us, the old school way of thinking, hey, you get a job, you contribute to your 401k, you do all those different things, and at the end of the working life, you've got Social Security and your 401k, and you're going to be good, right?
Yeah, that's the way I was raised.
And that's how, like Brian and Julie, and we get raised like this. What's harder, we can try to change our own mindset, and then we go back and we talk to our friends and family, and they're like, I don't think you should do that. I don't know that I think you might want to put the brakes on that because that's risky, right? And we allow the chatter of people who have not done what we're trying to do get in the way of what we really want to do, and we give ourselves those excuses, right? We don't move forward, and there's really three layers of things that hold us back, and one is outside influences. We blame the environment. We blame the interest rates. We blame there's a war going on. Oh, it's an election year. I'm going to wait for all that. So we blame all those outside things, right? And we start to say, okay, I'm going to justify why I'm sitting on the sideline. And it's usually those are the outside things. Once you break through that layer, then you've got your circle of influence. You've got other people, right? We don't want to take the blame, so we're going to blame other people. Well, my spouse, my partner, this is, my friends or my mom and dad, whoever it is, your circle of influence is saying that you don't want to do it. And the interesting thing about your circle of influence is they're doing it in a very loving way. They're not trying to hold you back. They're telling you everything that they believe to protect you. And so they really truly are wanting the best for you, but their advice might not be the best. And then ultimately, if we break through that, we have to look in the mirror, and that's really hard to do at times. And we have our own doubts and fears and insecurities that start to hold us back. And that's really what we have to attack. And from the very beginning is, what does that look like for us? One of the epidemics that I think we have as a society, especially in America, is we're very comfortable, and comfort's the killer of all growth. And we're getting very, very comfortable sitting on the sideline, not doing anything, because we can justify doing it. We can justify it with, it's not the right time for me. I'm too busy. The rates are too high. All these different things. Because we can justify, and we've gotten really good at justifying sitting on the sideline, we're getting very comfortable sitting on the sideline. And that's what I think is why it's also so exciting to see Brian and Julie, that they have to battle through that, or anybody in our mastermind. Everybody's having to break through that barrier of saying, I'm not going to sit on the sideline anymore. That's why I love what we do, and I get so fired up with working with the people in our Empire Club and inside of Vodyssey, is because everybody else wants to blame and justify sitting on the sideline. And I just feel like it's just such a shame, because there's so many opportunities. It doesn't matter really what time of, what time of the market it is, what time of life it is. You've got to be moving forward, or you're moving backward.
Yeah, that's right. I got into real estate back in 2019, and I first bought a bunch of long-term rentals. They were little condos, but essentially it was like single family condos. And I bought 14 of those in 14 months. And that was a big risk for me, because we were buying the condos and we were remodeling them. We were putting, like $25,000 into the CapEx expenditures, and we were really fixing these places up really nice. And then I bought Smoky Mountain Masterpiece, in the Great Smoky Mountains. And that was a huge risk, because that property, I bought that property for just shy of $2 million. And that was a massive property. And I remember thinking, I think I paid 20% down. I think it was like the purchase price was like $1.85 million, and I put $370,000 down. And then, because it was new construction, I had to furnish it. And golly, I know in our underwriting we've talked about different, percentages based on the square footage that you could expect the furniture to be. Well, I know I blew past whatever the normal metrics were, because I put some really nice stuff in there. And I mean, we have really, really high-end furniture, and we wanted it to have that kind of like high-end luxury feel. But we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on the furniture. And, once we got it all set up, we then turned it over to a full-time property manager. And since then, it has become, not nearly as big of an undertaking. But those initial months of getting a brand new property set up, I remember, I think you may have recommended, Gib, you might want to buy an existing property that's already a short-term rental that is kind of plug and play, right? But I never like to do anything the easy way. I had to do it the hard way. And so, we bought a new construction property, and we had to furnish it and get it up and running. And it's a lot of work on the front end. Once it's set up and you hand it over to the full service property manager, it's not nearly as bad. I mean, I get communications from them every once in a while. Hey, Gib, we need to replace a hot water heater, or we've got an issue with this appliance. Are you okay with it? And I just write back, yes, change it out. So now it's more on automatic pilot, but there is a heavy lift, or there can be a heavy lift at the beginning of setting up a vacation rental. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Absolutely. It's one of there's pros and cons to every asset class. I love real estate in general. You're never going to hear me talk bad about really any asset class. They all have pros and cons. One of the drawbacks of a short-term rental is that it's very front-loaded on your time commitment and requirements, right? Because unless you're just going to have somebody do it for you, which I don't typically recommend, we're writing the checks at the end of the day. I like to be involved on the front end. I like to be involved in the underwriting, the acquisition, and I like to be involved in the setup. And to your point, that can be 3 to 6 month process that it is very time intensive, right? And now it's short lived in the grand scheme of things, but it's an intense 6 months. And to your point, and so if you're not able to dive in and do that with short-term rentals, what happens is you buy these properties, you end up not spending the time that you need to on the front end to set up this unique experience and get the right management in place, and then it's a headache for the long term. It doesn't perform the way it should. You're wondering, do I have the right management partners? And so that's it's very, very important to be able to say, I'm going to dedicate that front end time. I know it's short-lived, but it doesn't feel short-lived when you're in that 6 month process, right? It's like, okay, this is a lot of work, and it's a lot of time and a lot of effort, and I have to really pay attention to this. But then once it's done, now all of a sudden, if I do it correctly, then, like, to your point, it's a very hands-off investment, the way that we set them up with, especially where, like, I do the same as you. I don't manage any of my own properties. And so But yes, that's one of the drawbacks of a short-term rental is they're very front-end loaded as far as time and effort.
You could describe it as a drawback, but it's also advantageous in some ways. And one of the things I love about it is, and I'm not going to get into the nuances of this. We can let Mike Pine explain that when he's on the show. But, that material participation is what you need in that first year. You want to be able to claim material participation, and you've got to do 500 hours. And if you're looking to get 500 hours between you and your spouse so that you can take, so you can do a cost segregation study and take bonus depreciation against your active income, then it's actually a good thing that you have to do that setup. And that setup, it takes a lot of time. I mean, just making the selections, even when I've worked with Mike Whitfield in the past, making the furniture selections and the artwork selections is very, very time consuming. And I've got Mike, who's an expert designer, giving me a list of things and saying, okay, Gib, here's 3 different couches that I think would be perfect for this space. Which one do you want? And I just point to the one that I selected, but it's still a very time consuming task, but it's a positive if you're trying to reduce your tax burden and claim material participation.
Yeah, especially when and a lot of people confuse that material participation with being a real estate professional. It's 2 totally different things. With short-term rentals, there is a loophole if you have an asset that has a lease length of under 7 days on average for the year, which short-term rentals typically qualify for that. All of a sudden, it's huge to be able to spend that amount of time, especially on that acquisition year, where you can get that bonus depreciation against your active income. And that's what's critical for a lot of people, and it's a huge tax savings. And so you're right. I mean, all things being equal and lining up and again, stacking all these different things on top of each other, they can become very, very attractive investments. But they're also something that when Jeff and Jamie were doing this, you're not buying 20 in a year probably. It's very, very difficult to scale them with a whole bunch of them at once because of that time.
Right. Yeah, I remember with Smoky Mountain Masterpiece, I had that down payment. I think it was $370,000. And then we did a cost segregation study, and we were able to take accelerated depreciation. That was back when, bonus depreciation 100%. Was at 100%. Yeah, it's on that tiered step down that they're doing right now. And I know you know it, but just for our listeners, it was 100% in 2022. It went down to 80% in 2023, and it's going to go down to 60% in 2024, and it continues all the way down until it's eliminated. Yeah. But, I was able to take all those losses from that cost segregation study and save myself a ton of money in tax. It was interesting because Mike and Kevin and I were actually talking about that because we were able to do a cost segregation study on all of those 14 condos that I had acquired in 2019 and 2020 and the short-term rental that I acquired in 2021, and it saved me about $250,000 in tax. That was the actual tax savings. It wasn't. Yeah. I mean, I had.
You're right off. That was your reduction in tax liability. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's a big needle mover, I think, for people that are interested in short-term rentals is, being able to take that depreciation and be able to, talk to an accountant like Mike Pine, for example, and learn about, how to do that.
Absolutely. It's huge.
So talk to me about property managers. You mentioned earlier that, I have a full service property manager. I think you typically use a full service property manager. Some of the Vodyssey members self-manage, and then some people have like a little bit of a hybrid. Can you kind of describe the 3 different, categories?
Yeah. So I'll start with self-management. Self-management is one that you're managing your own property, right? And the problem you're responsible for getting your guests, booking your guests, doing all the turnovers, managing the cleaners, everything that goes into managing a short-term rental, which you're in the hospitality space. And essentially you become a 24/7 concierge and making sure you're marketing expert, everything else. I'm not a big believer that a lot of people should self-manage because, and this is something that's contrary to what a lot of other trainers are out there preaching, because they say, well, you don't want that line item expense on property management. And so it sounds better on the front end to say, oh, there's all these tools in place and everything else. We got a lot of Vodyssey members. At this stage, we've got over 3,000 members in our mastermind group. And so we've got hundreds of members who still self-manage, right? But it was funny because there was just a thread inside of the Empire Club, and when we support them and we help them, and there was a thread saying that, self-managers, and they had a little get together and a little meetup, and they posted in the thread the software tools that they all use. And I mean, I'm talking a list of, there's at least 15 to 20 software tools that they're all trying to connect to do. To me, I don't think that a lot of people are cut out for that. Most people that we work with, they're busy professionals. They're not looking for a side hustle. They're not looking for a second job. But some of them that manage themselves, they do a beautiful job of it, but it really is a job. You're getting paid to manage your property, right? Because you have to spend the time and the effort. I don't do that because I'm not looking for that. The next step up is a hybrid approach, where you'll hire a property manager maybe about half the price or a third of the price of what a full service property manager would charge you, but they only worry about booking your property on the OTAs, communicating with the guests, and then you have to deal with the cleanings, the checkouts, the maintenance, all the boots on the ground things that have to happen. So if you're there, your boots on the ground, you can manage that part of it, and you don't want to worry the marketing side. The hybrid approach might work well for you. That's the most common hybrid approach, but it also can flip the script where you can do the marketing and hire a boots on the ground company. That's less common because there's less people to be able to hire boots on the ground. And when it comes to that, so that's the hybrid approach. You're paying for some services, you do the rest of it. Full service property management is what I choose because I don't want to manage my properties. I make a lot more money doing other things like buying more properties, working with other investors than I do managing my property. But on the front end expense, I always budget and underwrite 30% for management fees. And so 30% of my gross revenue goes right out of the top to my management partner. But what that allows me to do is what you and I were talking about before. It allows me to spend the time and effort on the front end, get everything set up, and then I have a professional that deals with it after that. Once in a while, to your point, if there's an appliance that goes out or something happens, they let us know. But I look at the P&Ls every month, and I look at the calendar when we want to go use these properties as a family. And that's what my involvement is after I get them set up. That's how I want my portfolio set up. I wasn't looking for a second job managing properties. And so those are kind of the three choices you have to make. And it's one of the most important choices you make as an investor, because if you choose to try to save money on the front end, you better have more time than you have money, right? Because you're going to be spending time managing your property. And it is what it is. We're in the hospitality game. It's not like having a long-term rental. It's not like having where you put one person in and they sign a year lease and you have to deal with a broken toilet here or there, or have a maintenance person do that. You're dealing with people in and out all the time and communicating with guests all the time. And so if you're not cut out for that and that doesn't sound fun, I always suggest don't do it to save the money. You should be underwriting property management in every deal anyways. If you're a smart investor, you always underwrite property management, even if you're going to manage your own property, underwrite the expense of property management in that deal when you're doing the pro forma.
Yeah, we've been super happy with a full service property manager, and we have absolutely no desire to, field those 24-hour concierge type calls. The first property manager that we started out with was at a time where demand was like an all-time high, and we were booked all the time. Our rates were probably a little bit too low, but our occupancy was very, very high. The problem was that we felt like the property wasn't being maintained to the level that we wanted it maintained, and so they were getting the property booked. Occupancy was like 90%, or higher. We had money coming in. We were happy with the amount of bookings, but the rates were considerably lower than I thought they should have been. And then we were having all sorts of problems, like the elevator was broken down. Now it was the heater on the pool, and then it was this and that and the other. And we started to get some bad reviews because the guest experience wasn't what it should be if you're paying, for a house that's 6 bedrooms in the Great Smoky Mountains, and we were paying 20% to that property manager. We switched over to a new property manager, and we're still paying 20%. But this property manager really has their finger on the dial in terms of like dialing up the prices when demand is high and turning it down when it's not. And so now I have much more constant contact with that property manager, and they're always addressing issues with maintenance on the front end. And what happens, I think, is if you take your eye off the ball, you can go visit your property and find that the maintenance is not up to your expectations, and that's a very disappointing feeling. If you don't keep an eye on the property manager. And so that was one of the things where we did not have a referral on the property manager front. We just kind of, took a risk and interviewed a couple of different companies, and we tried to go through some due diligence with them. But at some point, you just got to make a decision, and if it doesn't work out, make a change.
Make a change, yeah. And it's interesting when you mention occupancy, right? There's this inverse relationship between prices and occupancy. The higher your occupancy, typically the lower your price, and then you start pushing your price and your occupancy comes down. And there's this equilibrium somewhere, and you have to test it in every market where you're most profitable, because the lower the occupancy, the less wear and tear you have on a property. And so one of my most profitable properties was that I operated at 30% occupancy, and it's we really, really pushed the price in the peak season, and we just, our occupancy levels drop a bit below the actually average in the area, but our prices are so much higher than average that our total revenue and net profit on that property is awesome, and we have very little wear and tear, and so it works out well. And so you have to really watch that, because sometimes you drop the prices too low. Like, I'm not a fan of trying to operate in the top tier of occupancy. I'm a much bigger fan of operating in the top tier of pricing. And then my occupancy is going to suffer a little bit, but that's going to be less wear and tear on my property, less maintenance on the property, and then ultimately, hopefully, more profit as well, because we're really pushing the price when we can.
No, that's really interesting and something that I think is important. Talk to me a little bit about what is a target? I know that the group members are benefiting from their investments in short-term rentals from multiple different angles, right? We talked about the tax benefits earlier. They're also looking for a specific cash-on-cash return, or hoping to hit some return there. And then we also benefit from appreciation, right?
Yeah.
What kind of a target cash-on-cash return are you recommending to your students? Is there a certain threshold where it's like, if you're not going to get this much of a cash-on-cash return, then you probably should not do the deal?
Yeah, it's interesting because there are so many things that stack on top of it being a good investment, right? And so I typically target a very modest cash-on-cash return, somewhere around 5 to 8%. But I want to invest in markets that have the potential for me to hit 15, 20, 25% cash-on-cash return within about an 12 to 18 month period. So about a year and a half, I want to be able to have the potential in that market to hit higher than that. The reason for that is because when you launch your first year, you're in the launch phase, you're doing a lot of different things, you don't have repeat customers, so your revenue is going to be down a little bit compared to after you maximize the asset. But with the environments that we're in, I've made a lot of money on properties that I underwrote and broke even on as far as a cash-on-cash return, because the thing that I love about short-term rentals is that it allows us to buy quality assets in quality areas. And when you can buy quality, your long-term investment potential goes up significantly, right? You and Kate have a really nice property in the Smokies. Your 10-year period of appreciation on that property is going to be probably pretty nice. And so because it's a quality asset in a quality area, versus maybe some of the long-term rentals that are going to be a little bit less expensive, but they're going to cash flow. They're going to have a higher cash-on-cash return, but they're probably not going to appreciate as much. And so when you look at a 5-year period, a 10-year period on the tax advantages, the appreciation, the note pay down, and then ultimately, I want obviously passive income and cash flow. So I have to look at the potential in that market, what I can do to maximize. But a lot of times, Gib, I'm looking at properties right now, especially where interest rates are at, in that 4, 5, 6% cash on cash return, and they still make very, very good investments for us.
And of course, that cash on cash return may get a lot better if interest rates go down or when they go down, and you have less debt service.
Yes, absolutely.
So talk to me about hot markets. I personally am just interested in this, and I know there's so many different markets out there for vacation rentals. And you mentioned the Poconos earlier. I actually was talking to another Vodyssey member a couple of days ago that had bought in that area. I'm in the Great Smoky Mountains. What are your favorite markets right now, or where are you seeing as being the really hot markets that your students are targeting?
Yeah, one, we really target the top destinations, right? One, I'll tell you, there's good properties and bad properties in any market that has a lot of people visiting, and they can visit for a lot of different reasons. We consider and we think about short-term rentals in vacation destination markets. That's not always the case, though. You can be very, very profitable in other types of markets, but overall, I tell people to start with a market that you would like to own a vacation home in. Because when you create that unique experience, when you have that property set up, if you're interested in it, those final 2 phases are a lot easier than buying in a market that you just bought because it was an investable market, for example, right? So, but some of the markets that we're watching and tracking right now that seem very investable to us, have a long-term profit drivers, are college towns. And so we're really, there's a lot of major colleges in smaller towns that don't have a lot of great accommodations. And you'll find that a lot of, a university or college town, they don't even have to be big universities. We got one of our members in a little a town in Nebraska that's a junior college town, and she kills it buying properties in this market. And so but college towns there's people coming in for sporting events, there's people coming in for graduations, and a lot of these different markets, they don't have really great accommodations because a lot of times they're in smaller communities, and we assume that these big colleges a lot of times are in these big massive metropolitan areas, and a lot of times they're not. And so college towns are always on our radar right now. Specifically, they're fairly a lot of them are fairly low acquisition costs versus the revenue that you can generate, and then but always on the front end of that is the destination markets that you want to own a vacation home. And there's going to be, as long as there's demand, and the fact that you want a vacation there is an indication that there's demand. I don't care about saturation. I don't care about anything other than is there money being spent? Is there more money being spent today than there was a year ago? I want to see that upward trajectory of money being spent in the market. But you're hard pressed to find a market right now that demand is not continuing to go up. And so we still start the major destinations, and it could be some of my favorite ones are the backyard resort communities. Those, not the Destins and of the world, not the Great Smoky Mountains of the world, not the Blue Ridge Georges of the world. It's the Bear Lake, Utah. It's, some of these markets that are regionally known, and they're these backyard resort communities that everybody in the region knows about, but outside of that, they're not nationally known destination markets. And so some of those are really fun markets as well right now.
Let me ask you this. Have you seen a softening in the demand in certain markets since, I guess in markets that were thriving, around the COVID era? Is that something that you're seeing?
We're really not. We're seeing a couple markets kind of level off a little bit, but they're still slightly going up. And those are, like, I was just looking at Destin, and that's a market that the peak. So I look at the peaks and valleys year over year, the peaks and the valleys, and the peaks continue to go higher year over year, and so do the valleys. Destin's a market it's almost leveling off, and we're starting to see the demand start to level off. But it's been a very, very interesting year. We're nearing the end of 2023 now, and it's been a really interesting year. The U.S. consumer has been very, very resilient. They have been spending a lot of money, continuing to spend a lot of money. Short-term rentals, The third quarter stats just came out. The end of third quarter stats came out, and across the board, and a very interesting statistic went up was RevPAR. And RevPAR has been going down because supply has been going up. So RevPAR, for those people that are listening, is revenue per available rental or unit, right? And what that is just the total dollars being spent divided by the total number of homes available, right? And so, and that's an indicator that, the supply is starting to level off as well, but money keeps being spent. And so now RevPAR is actually going up across the board. And that's a US statistic, but looking at market over market, I do live webinars every single month, and we go live and we have 500-600 people on those webinars, and I always do a live Q&A. And it's interesting because every single time I'm on one of those, somebody will say, well, in my market, the demand has just gone down significantly. And I always do it live. I say, well, can you share that market? Because I'm having a hard time finding markets that are actually going down. And my indicator and my measure of demand is money being spent. I want to see, is money being spent? Because I know how to get my unfair share of that money. I don't care about RevPAR. I don't care about, that's your fair share of business. I don't really care about that, but that has actually gone up the year over year. But every single time they put it in there, we look at the peaks and we look at the valleys over the last 3 to 5 year period, and we're continuing to see even these major markets that had this huge COVID spike, they're still continuing to go up. And so it's very interesting to see that we haven't seen it soften and go down. I do anticipate that more and more markets are going to start to level off because there is a lot of money right now being spent on travel. And so you would assume at some point that the money being spent is going to maybe level off and kind of stay consistent. But the only market I've seen an indicator of that is in the Destin market, which is a major market. And I'm sure that we'll see that moving forward, but that's a lot of money still being spent on demand.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but it seems like there are always good deals out there to be had. And even when interest rates are high and there's other macroeconomic factors that are outside of our control, there's always good deals to be found. You just have to know where to look.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's understanding the asset you're in. Any investor loves when the market shakes up a little bit, when the market starts to shift around, because we know, I always tell people opportunity does not present itself in a present wrapped in a bow saying this is the best opportunity. Opportunity is when you can recognize what the asset is, all of the underlying details of the market, the asset itself, what's going on, all the profit drivers, and being able to recognize opportunities. One of our most successful success stories we had was it was in Destin, and the property sat on the market when homes were, the average time on the market was less than a week. This property sat on the market for 5 months. And so it was just ignored by everybody. And Jeff called me up and said, Shawn, this looks good. What am I missing? I'm brand new at this, but just look over my shoulder and tell me what I'm missing here. And we looked at it and said, Jeff, that's a good opportunity. It needs a couple things, but really it's very, very surface minor things. Long story short, he bought this asset when nobody else wanted it. He made a couple $100,000 a year on it for a few years, just barely sold it, put over $1 million in his pocket, and he started with $15,000 in cash and a home equity line of credit for $150, and completely changed what was going on. But the point of that is, it was an opportunity that nobody recognizes. If everybody's recognizing it as an opportunity, it's probably not one. You probably missed the boat. And that's why real investors, they love these shifting markets, because you can find good opportunities and it's where everybody else doesn't recognize it. It's educating yourself. It's bridging that knowledge gap and understanding the asset you're getting into, whether it's commercial, multifamily, long-term rentals, short-term rentals. It doesn't really matter what it is. You have to recognize what an opportunity looks like in your space and in your market.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, Shawn, you have built just an amazing community, and Vodyssey is just such a high value program. You've got so many really good people, and you have personally done so much for Kate and I. We're just super appreciative of your guidance. I mean, we kind of went from playing it small, small time real estate into doing really big things like, Smoky Mountain Masterpiece it's a great property and it turns off a lot of profit every month. And, I love looking at my Owner X app and being able to see what kind of cash flow we've got coming in. I always know that around the 20th of the month, I'm going to get a check. And I think this month it's like $24,000 that we've got coming to us, after paying property management fees. But if you could tell our listeners, how can they go about getting a hold of you?
Yeah, the best place is just to go to Vodyssey.com. It's Vodyssey.com. And we got a lot of resources there. You can get a free copy, a PDF version of my book, What the Hell is a Lifestyle Asset? Kind of gives you my view of this world, of how to go through all three of those major phases in acquisition, setup management, and then marketing ultimately of building a successful portfolio. I've got some video trainings. I've got a podcast on there called Vacation Rental Revolution. So if you want to tune into some of those things, lots of resources. Just go check out Vodyssey.com, and then if you want to speak to our team, there's ways to find us on there for sure.
Fantastic. Well, Shawn, look, thank you very much for being with us today. I really appreciate it. It's great to see you and good to catch up.
Absolutely, Gib. It's so fun to see you and what you and Kate are doing, and just like using that, Smoky Mountain Masterpiece as a springboard into everything else you're doing. I was telling you off camera, I'm really proud of you, and I appreciate you having me on here and being a part of the show.
Absolutely. Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Go Big with Gib. If you haven't already, go follow us on social media at Gib Irons. We'll see you next time.